you'd take one.
Fantastic word board. Nice soft sticks there as well.
My name's Bailey, I'm going to be interviewing you. Can you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Paul William Mason, 61 years old, from Alnwick.
Can you tell us about Alnwick?
As in Alnwick, the town? Yeah, so I was born in 1961. So it was quite a different town back in when I was sort of in my early teens, and there wasn't a lot of cars on the road, whereas now there's cars everywhere.
Is that loud? Where's it registered? Can I just ask?
About 24.
Oh, phenomenal. That's great. Rebecca, I think you can go closer. Yeah, go on, move it in. Rebecca. Tell her when she comes to the shop, please. Yeah, you're just in the shop there, so just tilt down 10 a little bit. There's good. Paul, can you tell us about the town? So, what's significant in the town? Landmarks, population, the type of town it is, the type of community it is, that sort of thing.
So Alnwick's a very community-focused town. Everybody knows everybody. You've got the castle, you've got the garden. They're probably the biggest employers in the town now, where when I was a lot younger, the sort of Alnwick District Council was a big employer. Where I worked for the Inland Revenue, that was quite a big employer. There's a lot of civil service officers. That's all gone now. And the biggest employers are the gardens and the castle. And like I say, it's a very friendly town. That's what most visitors, tourists, that's what they always say. They can't believe how friendly people are. Alnwick Fair was basically a medieval fair that lasted a week. And I was about 8 years old when it started, which I think it was about 1969, 1970. And one of my first memories, my mum used to work for an antique dealer. There was an antique shop down at the entrance to Bow Alley, which became Oscar's Pub, and it's now part of the Dirty Bottles. So my mum worked there, and during Fair Week, the antique shop would close and it would have a stall in the marketplace. And my mum and her best friend Gwen would make their own period costume dresses and dress up. And I used to, after school, I would go down and sit with my mum in the stall. That's kind of one of my earliest memories of the fair. So it basically consisted of the town stopping what it was doing for a week, and I would say 80 to 90% of the population would get dressed up in period costume. So it was kind of like a medieval fair. It had stalls in the marketplace, it had a duck and stool, and you had like a court on the stage, and they would get various girls. Some knew they were going to get ducked, some didn't, and they were taken up on the stage, tried by the court, and then put in the duck and stool and basically dropped into a large skip of freezing cold water.
What positives do you think it brought to Alnwick?
Sorry?
What positives do you think that it brought to Alnwick?
Lots of positives. It brought the whole town together. At the beginning of on the first day, there was a parade through the town, and people just got together, created different floats with different sorts of subjects. So you had schools, you had community clubs, you had just pubs or streets just getting together and making up their own float and becoming part of the parade. So the whole town basically took part. Very much so. It brought tourists into the town, so the town was packed with visitors for the full week, and they were obviously spending the money in the stalls in the marketplace, eating in the cafes, drinking in the pubs at nights, which they always had like extended hours, so they've opened later.
What were some of your best memories at Fair?
Probably my best memory was I'd obviously grown up and I started working in Alnwick tax office. So they would change, like the officer in charge, the most senior person in the office, they would change every 2 or 3 years. And when you had a new officer in charge arrived, one of the first things you had to tell them and persuade them to do was that during Alnwick Fair, the militia who went around the town making sure people behaved themselves, on one day during the fair, they would come into the tax office, arrest the officer in charge, take him along to the marketplace, took him up on stage, tried him at the court for taxing the people of Alnwick far too much. He would then...
Go from start that story again, please, Paul, because this is the...
Where do you want us to start from?
Just start from the militia would come into...
So the militia would come into the tax office, go up to the officer in charge's room, arrest him, then...
Sorry, Paul, we'll just go again just for the footsteps there. Sorry,
Yep.
just a little sandwich. One more time, my friend.
Right. So the militia, the police who made sure people behaved during the fair week, would come to the tax office, come in, go up to the officer in charge's room, arrest him, drag him along to the marketplace, take him up on the stage, try him in the court on the stage for taxing the people of Alnwick far too much during fair week. He would then get dragged down, put into the stocks, and for the next half an hour, people would pelt him with rotten tomatoes, wet sponges, anything that was there to hand.
Why do you think it's no longer a thing?
It's a very good question. I think that the people lost interest, and there was also other activities and things that went on. Like there was the music festival, there was the summer events down in the pastures. So I think it was kind of like there was too many things happening. And again, sort of for the last few years of its existence, there was less and less people getting dressed up. So I think it was just people kind of lost interest.
Do you miss it?
Yes, very much so. Again, sort of when you grew up, one of the biggest things would be taking a week off work during Fair Week, because the pubs had lots and lots of activities, games, and what have you. So you basically, as an adult, in your early sort of 20s, it was a big thing because you were out every night taking part in the games. Some pubs had their version of blind date. There was Dwyle flunking. There was all sorts of jousting up at the Tanners.
Since COVID and not being allowed to be together, why do you think festivals and community gatherings are so important?
They're very important. We had nearly 2 years of not being able to meet up with people, not being able to arrange activities like what Alnwick Fair used to be like the music festival, like the music acts down at the pastures. So now that we're kind of through that, I think it's more important than ever to resurrect these sort of things. And maybe now is the right time to look at bringing the fair back.
What other great community gatherings have you seen or know of in Alnwick?
There's various, there's the music festival, but that again, sort of pre-pandemic, that was didn't seem to be as well attended as it used to be. You've got the various activities that they have regularly down at the gardens. The castle put on various things, but we need things like that. We need the weekend of music acts that pre-pandemic that started putting on down in the pastures with like a music festival. We need to bring that sort of back.
What kind of things at the fair were there for young people?
So for young people, what they used to do was bring people out of their school and take them down, and they would perform on the stage. They would sing, they would dance, they would perform poetry. They used to have the junior bellman's competition, the fair princess competition. There was lots and lots of different activities.
What costumes did you see that like stood out and you remember?
The ones that stood out to me were the sort of elderly ladies' costumes that were so bright and colourful, so intricate. Because some people hired the costumes, but there was other people made their own costumes, and it was the homemade costumes that looked better than the ones you could tell that somebody had just gone to a hire shop and hired. In the tax office where I worked, we used to get dressed up in kind of like Dickensian type period costume. So you would go to the public counter and sort of see people in your Dickensian costume.
Can you ever see it coming back, and if it did, what do you think would change?
I could see it coming back, but again, it would need that nucleus of people to get together, because it was something that took a whole 12 months to organise. So when one fair ended, straight away, they were preparing and organising the following year's fair. So we would need people with the hunger to bring it back. We'd need people with the right skills and experience. So we'll probably want to tap into people who were part of the original fair organisation, but also bring new people on board as well, and especially younger people. And we need to get the town together so that it's the whole town that get dressed up, and it's the whole town that basically take part.
Fantastic. Any questions from the field?
Can I ask you about when we asked about the young people and said there was
You would see a camera soon. Beautiful. That's right.
you said for the young people there was a princess and a cat. The other one wasn't it? Could you elaborate on those a little bit? What kind of things did they do?
Yep, so for young people, they had a fair princess competition. So you'd have like an adult princess, but you also had like a junior princess competition. So that was kind of like an 8, 9, 10-year-old. So you'd maybe get about 20, and they would be dressed up, and they would go up on stage, and there'd be this competition, and the best dressed and best performer would get picked as the fairy princess. And you also had a junior bellman competition. So you had a bellman who would go around town shouting, "Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah," ringing this loud bell. And so there was like a junior bellman competition again for 8, 9, 10-year-olds. So they would get up on stage and they would perform with the bell, and the best performance would win, and they would spend a week as the junior bellman and going around with the main bellman, helping them out.
Was it competitive? Did kids was it if you won the princess or would you brag about it all year kind of thing?
Yes, and obviously your photographs were in the Northumberland Gazette for a couple of weeks, and then you had a bit of bragging rights when you went back to school and things like that.
Can you tell me about like when you were a kid and a teenager, like what was like being a child and a teenager looking at Alnwick Fair?
So, as a child, through a child's eyes, it was this big, colourful occasion, and I just remember just so many people. And then, as you grew up into becoming a teenager, it got a little bit smaller, but that's because you were sort of growing up. And then as an older teenager, you got more into kind of the more adult side of Alnwick Fair, which was drinking in the pubs, and the pubs had extended hours. You quite often, most people would take a week off work so that they could be out every night drinking copious amounts of alcohol.
Any other questions? No? Okay. Brilliant. What I want to do now